You know, we're at a really cool moment for music biopics right now. You know, that genre that used to be the most predictable thing in Hollywood. The whole let's start at the beginning of this musician or artist's life and then go into their struggles and then finally the end part of their life. That's all changing. Finally. And honestly, it's about time. Because in the last few years, filmmakers have decided they got bored, I guess, and decided to try some different formulas to tell the stories of these great people. And what we're getting now is a wave of biopics that I think are way more interesting, way more artful, and at times way more reflective of who these artists really were. And I want to break down 4 movies that show exactly how the biopic has evolved. Better Man, Elvis, A Complete Unknown, and the recent Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere film. Each one takes a different swing, but together they show how the whole genre is leveling up. Let's get into it. So first up, Better Man. This one bombed at the box office. We're not going to talk about that here. I made a whole separate video for that, which you should check out if you've seen the movie, of course. But out of all the examples that I want to talk about, this one is the most like the classic biopics that we all love, like Ray and Walk the Line. But even so, I think Better Man is different enough. It goes super dark, and I mean legitimately dark. The film actually dives into the complicated, controversial, and sometimes painful truths about Robbie Williams. It's to a point where it's so self-aware, so self-deprecating that it's sometimes uncomfortable. And to be fair, the other biopics do this too, but Better Man does it with flair never seen before for me. Given that it's directed by the guy who did The Greatest Showman, it makes sense. Oh, and also, not to mention, Robbie Williams is a goddamn CGI monkey. But yeah, the film digs into addiction, shame, ego, loneliness, real emotional stuff, and it does it in a way that's creative, surreal, flashy, and heavy. It's also the only biopic so far that's made me bawl my eyes out in the theater. Now, by the same token, you've got Elvis. This movie is a flare gun in cinematic form. Baz Luhrmann took Elvis Presley's life and put all the details in a blender, put some fireworks in the blender, turned it on, and said, yeah, this is the movie. But it all works. Because Elvis isn't your run-of-the-mill biopic, it's trying to show you what Elvis's world felt like. The chaos, the speed, the spectacle, the exploitation, the addiction to fame, and most importantly, perhaps, it portrayed Elvis the way people at that time saw him, like an untouchable god. I mean, the film is so exaggerated at times that it's laughable, all in a good way though. And that's the evolution right there. Biopics aren't just telling stories anymore, they're expressing them. You watch Elvis, and it's not about whether the scene happened exactly like that. It's about the feeling the scene might have had at that time, or the way we choose to remember the history of Elvis. And that stylization, the artistic freedom, is why the film stands out from every other copy-paste biopic formula we've seen before. Next is A Complete Unknown. This one takes a totally different approach. Instead of a cradle-to-grave story, it zooms in on one specific era of Bob Dylan's life, the Electric period. The moment where the folk world turned on him and he reinvented himself artistically. The film just kind of begins with Dylan traveling and his career starting to set off, and it stops right at his peak almost. This is huge because narrowing the timeline changes everything. When you only focus on a few months or years, you're not trying to summarize a life, you're studying a turning point. You're showing how a single choice, a specific identity crisis, an artistic risk defined everything that came after. And that, in many ways, tells you everything you need to know about that one artist. And because of that, it becomes way more emotional, way more psychological. I felt at the end of the movie that I understood Bob Dylan, the person. Even though I didn't really see, his childhood or, he's still alive, but, I didn't see his later years in the film. Now, of course, the movie also showed Dylan as a flawed person, and it showed him as a magnificent artist where his rawness and simplicity was his superpower. There is great focus on cinematography, lighting, and feeling too. There are shots that linger, that say so much. It's intimate, it's reflective. The film also didn't try to paint Dylan as this giant legend. It's showing him as a human being stuck in this weird moment where he was too ahead of his time for everyone around him. And by the end, the title of the movie becomes clear. This was a guy who didn't feel like he belonged anywhere. Truly just a Rolling Stone, as they say. These slice-of-life biopics feel so much more human because they're not rushing, they're observing. And finally, we got Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere. This movie came out very recently, and it's the reason why I wanted to make this video, really. Now, like I was saying about these biopics narrowing down their timelines, this movie goes even tighter. It doesn't look at his entire life, not even a good 5 years of his life. It focuses on, I don't know, like a year of his life, maybe 2 at most. It doesn't tackle his childhood, for the most part. It doesn't look at his later career, none of that. It focuses on one era, one album. It focuses on Bruce making that album in one room. It's all one moment in the life of an artist. It's about the making of Springsteen's probably most interesting record, Nebraska. And that decision to focus on a single creative moment does something really powerful. It takes away the daunting pressure to explain his entire legacy. Instead, it digs into the vulnerability and isolation Bruce was working through while making some of the most haunting music of his life. It digs into the guy's depression, which this movie touches on in the most careful and nuanced way possible. It does a great job of showing just how unknown the state of depression was to people. And what I mean is, of course, people at that time, in the early 80s, knew about depression, but they just didn't know how to talk about it. And this movie shows that by showing what depression is like. And he also later explains how he feels in the most beautiful yet heartbreaking way possible, all while never using the word depressed at all. I just love that kind of shit. But yeah, you ultimately learn about Bruce through this more narrow lens than you would from a 3-hour montage of his whole childhood, teens, 20s, 30s, and beyond. By zooming in, the movie actually opens up. You see the cracks, you see the insecurity, you see the search for meaning. There's one scene that stands out above all the rest for me, and I'm going to spoil it here, so look ahead if you haven't seen it, but it's the scene where Bruce is in front of his therapist after he decides to seek mental health support for his depression. His therapist asks him to basically just start from the beginning of his life, his story, and it's followed by silence. The camera turns to Bruce, and all of a sudden, Bruce starts crying. The camera slowly zooms in as he continues to cry. He just breaks down, and it's magnificent. And it's also, a huge compliment to Jeremy Allen White's acting here. But that scene right there tells us everything we need to know about Bruce Springsteen, the man, all while never expanding the scope of the story as a whole. It's funny, too, how in that scene, the therapist asks him to start from the beginning, almost like all biopics do, right? And it's followed by just him not saying anything at all. It's genius. The movie was ultimately beautifully intimate and personal. Some threads were unresolved even, and I loved that about it. It honestly felt like I was watching a normal, dramatic, fictional movie. It didn't feel like I was watching a musical biopic. But ultimately, why does this all matter? Well, simply, it's opening the doors for more approaches like this for biopics in the future. I'm excited to get more of this type of approach to biopics. I want more slice of life stuff rather than whole big picture stuff, at least for now. I mean, like I said earlier, I love the older, more classic biopics. Nothing wrong with that, but art evolves, and oftentimes I think for the better. At least that's the hope, right? Hell, I'm excited to see this type of formula latch on to non-music biopics, which, I don't know, I think it's already sort of happening. We saw Oppenheimer, where yes, we did see a little bit of Oppenheimer's early college life and his later years, but mostly the movie takes place in one specific moment of his life, the creation of that atomic bomb. So I think we're entering just a whole new era for biopics in general, one where filmmakers stop worrying about making an estate happy or fitting every single success, of a person's life into a 2-hour runtime. I hope we get to continue a world where we start telling the kinds of stories that actually carry some heft. It's funny, right? Who would have thought that by going smaller, you actually get more detail and nuance? Anyway, let me know in the comment section below what music biopic hit you the hardest and which artist you think deserves this new, more interesting treatment, or just any any person, in history that you think deserves this. I'd love to hear it. Give this video a like if you like, dislike it if you didn't. Share this video with your biopic loving friends if you will. If it's your birthday, happy birthday to you, you beautiful creature. But I think that's it for me. You all take care, stay safe, and until next time, I love you.